Okay, we are live on our social media, and here we are on Zoom. Welcome, dear friends, to today's class, which is on the topic of educating children so that you can give them something which will last a lifetime. Now, I'm a little uncomfortable with this title, the idea of creating long life students, because when people read that, they think, well, it doesn't apply to me because I'm not a teacher. What exactly has that got to do with me? Right? I'm a businessman or woman. I'm an architect, a doctor, whatever it is. The truth is that in Judaism, we don't really care what your trade is. Well, we do care actually, but that doesn't really make a difference. There are people who make it their life careers, their professions, to work in education. But education for us, the Jewish people, is not limited to the classroom. Actually, the classroom is just one way, and not even the most effective way, of teaching and sharing knowledge with other people. The greatest form of knowledge that is passed on to other people is a personal and emotional relationship, ideally one-on-one. So when we're going to talk about teaching today, we're not just talking about teaching in a classroom, and we're definitely not just talking about teachers as we understand them today, although they are very important. Creating students, giving over knowledge is incumbent upon every single man, woman, and yes, even child, because we are always having teachable moments. And people we don't even realize are our students are learning from us. Maybe not always from what we directly teach them, maybe indirect teachings, maybe information we share with them, maybe in the way we act and behave towards them. There's always information, there's always Torah, there's always ethical and moral ideas that we are passing on to other people. So today, we're going to talk about that. So what we're going to describe today actually could be understood in both formal and informal education. Formal education means the classroom, the college professor, I teach college, the program, the lesson, the shiur. That's formal education. But this is also informal education. A parent with a child, a friend giving you knowledge or information, right? A counselor, a therapist. Of course, information and knowledge can and should be taught all the time. So although we're talking about teaching over here, once again, we're talking formal educating and informal education. Both of them are seen as equally important, if not more important, by informal, because that's the more common. That's more prevalent. You're going to have a lot more interactions with people at your job, in your home, on vacation than you'll ever have just sitting in a classroom. I'll just give you, comes to my head. I just flew back last night with my family. We went for Shabbat Chanukah to Miami, and we flew back late last night. And I saw a guy in the airport. He looked Jewish. He didn't realize he looked Jewish, but he looked Jewish. Even with a mask on, I could tell. So you're in an airport, you get schmoozing with people, and he says, yeah, I'm Jewish, and this is my girlfriend sitting next to me. She's not Jewish, we're thinking of converting. And we have a conversation. And I tell him, a rabbi is like, I don't believe it. You know what? I haven't spoken to a rabbi in 25 years. And now finally I'm sitting here. I'm having a conversation with one just when me and my girlfriend are thinking of things. So he actually took my information. He WhatsApped me right away. And we started building up a connection. Even that interaction in the airport. Every rabbi has got stories in the airport. Right? Because that's when suddenly you're forced or you're able to have a conversation with people who are outside your immediate sphere of a classroom or in your home or at the supermarket, in an airport. Who knows who you're going to see there? And there's always stories that happen to us in airports. And it's not by coincidence. Okay, so today we're going to look at two approaches the rabbis give us when it comes to formal and informal education. And these are two, I would say two ways. There's two, these are really descriptions of two approaches to connect to a student. And both of them have one thing in common. And that is, both of them want to see lifelong results. Any teacher, anyone who's giving knowledge to another, whether a parent to a child, a friend, a therapist, whoever it is, we're all going to have teaching moments, want the information, the knowledge they are imparting to the other individual, not just to impact them for a minute, but to stay with them, and if it's Torah information, of course, more important than any other form of education, to affect their heart as well. To affect their heart as well. So that's what we're looking at. So both of these approaches are not short-term results, we're looking for long-term impact. And both of these, although they're very different, and there's a different mind frame that goes into them, both of them are going to have the potential to change a person's essence in the short term, and God willing, more importantly, in the long term. And the two ways, the two approaches are described with one word each. One word each. One is called zorea, which is seeding or planting, and the other form of imparting lifelong information to our children, to our students, our friends, whoever it is called bona, building. You're either planting / seeding, or you are building. Bona is to build. What does this mean? What is the difference between these two approaches, and how are they going to impact an individual, not only in the short term, but more importantly in the long term? And how do they relate to formal and informal education? And zorea, seeding or planting, is putting an idea into another person's mind and heart, because we want to impact their hearts, and allowing that information to sit and slowly grow, slowly take hold of the person. There is no immediate revelation that comes to this person. Maybe there is, but that's not your purpose. Your purpose is, I want to put, even in English it works so well, I want to put a seed into your mind. Right? Even in English it sounds great. What does it mean, I want to put a seed in your mind? I'm taking like an apple seed and stick it in someone's ear? No, don't do that. A seed is, this information is not going to become apparent to you right now. I'm giving you something, a piece of knowledge, some wisdom that right now you may not be able to appreciate. But that's okay. I want to put it inside your head. I want to download this information into your mind because I want you to sit with it. I want you to allow it to percolate in your heart, in your mind, in your psyche. Because at some future point, this information is going to become more relevant to you than it does right now. And that is a lot of wisdom, especially Torah wisdom. A lot of ideas that we hear are the zorea form. They sit with us and we think about them and we get more information, just like a seed is buried deep. You don't see it. You don't recognize the seed in the ground. And it takes weeks or months till the shoot comes out at just the right moment. And you can't rush it. It's got its own time frame that God decides. And then eventually it breaks the surface. And you're like, oh, I'm starting to get something out of this wisdom that came my way. And then it starts to lift up even higher out of the soil. And then the blossom appears. You're like, you know, something I heard from my grandmother, something I heard from my parents. They always said this. I never understood it. It never made sense. And now I'm starting to see the fruits slowly develop on this idea that I heard 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Some people say 30 years previously. That lesson that my savta, that my parents, that my teacher, that my friends said to me, that I heard in a shiur, didn't make sense at the time, but it's in my brain. It's there, and now the seed has turned into a plant, and it's turned into a fruit, and I can enjoy this information as an adult after 5 years, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of lifelong knowledge. And now I get it. Now I get it. So we're going to come back to this because there's a lot more to say on this, because the lifelong impact of a Zoreya form of knowledge is very impactful. Very impactful. And when you try to convey Zoreya information, that means information that sits with the student and takes weeks, months, years, decades to see fruit from your labors. It's very frustrating sometimes. I mean, I experience this because not everyone who I teach is always ready to hear what you have to tell them. So you're putting something in their mind and they poo-poo it. They discard it. They say, no, I don't need this information. This is not applied to me. I'm not this person. I'm like, right now, it's not you. But you know, people change. And there could be a time in your life, there could be a circumstance that the knowledge I'm putting into your head is gonna create blossoms. It's gonna start with a little shoot and then blossoms. And it could be when you get married. It could be when you have kids. It could be when your kids grow up and you leave home. The information is gonna be with you and you'll have it in your storehouse to help prepare you deal with what is being thrown at you from life. That's Zoreya. So what's the other version? The other version is binyan, boneh, binyan. What's binyan? Zoreya versus binyan. Binyan is to build. Building is, I'm giving you information because I need that change in you right now. This is what you need to do right now. Now, young children are more in the binyan side, seemingly. We're going to see it's not true. But they're more on the binyan side, meaning you want the kid to do something. It's like putting a brick in the wall. There's a hole in a wall, and right now, I need to stuff it up. Pick up your clothes off the floor. Is there a lesson to be had from picking your clothes up off the floor and not leaving your towels on the floor, constant disease in my house, and hanging it up to dry? There is a long-term idea, the idea of creating order and not allowing chaos to exist in our homes and in our spiritual homes too. There is a long-term Zoreya to you picking up your towels and letting them dry. But there's also a bone, and that is you can't walk around your bedroom if there's towels lying on the floor. Right? They're going to get dirty, moldy, and you let them dry out so you can use them again tomorrow. So, boneh, binyan, as a form of education is immediate results. I need to download information right now into your mind so that you accept it and understand that we need to see some immediate results of this knowledge or wisdom. A child misbehaves. Don't curse. There's a planting or seeding, a Zoreya impact that's coming. Speak nicely. You'll make more friends. Your future will change. But when you tell a young child to speak nicely, or whatever it is, you're saying, don't talk that way, and don't talk to me that way, because that's unacceptable. So, it's not always one or the other. But sometimes you need to have immediate binyan results. And when it comes to young children, for the most part, we're living in the world of binyan. But we're also living in the world of Zoreya. You're building through information, but you don't want to just have your child understand right now they've got to pick up their towels. They've got to help Im and Abba set up for Shabbat. They can't talk that way to their parents. It can't just be a boneh, don't do that now. There's always got to be a little bit of Zoreya, a little bit of seeding. That is, if you want friendships, you want relationships, talking that way is not going to help. So sometimes we, the recipients of knowledge, of wisdom, get the lesson right away. We understand right away. There's the information. I understand. I know I need to make a change in my life right now. That's the boneh. But as you get older and you mature, and hopefully we change through the information that we learn, we understand that not everything we can do right now. Not every lesson we hear are we going to be able to react to right now, whether because of time, effort, circumstances, financial, or whatever. In other words, I'll give you an example. I teach lessons to young singles on marriage, relationships, and having kids. And they're like, well, I'm not really there right now. I'm like, I hear, but I need to download that information. I need to give you this Torah thought, because at some point, it's going to be relevant. And if I give it to you then, it's going to be too late. You need this information now. You need to have it now, although it's not relevant to you in any way, shape, or form. But you're preparing yourself as a single person for married life all the time. I'm not saying that we teach 5-year-olds about marriage. Well, we do by acting in front of them the way that we want them to be many years later. So children, as people say, and it's very true, are very smart. They understand. They know the difference. They're wiser than we give them credit for. And they know what the reality is. And so if you think you're just bonehead building your child by just downloading information, boom, 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 like a brick in a wall, and just building up this kid, that's one thing. But there's always another level. And that is the lesson you're giving your student, child, friend, whoever it is. Or like I said last night, I'm in an airport and I'm talking to this couple and sharing information with them. Am I ever going to see them again? Who knows? But I want that information to be, I want that knowledge that I gave them in those 20 minutes at the airport last night. I wanted to be with them for the rest of their lives. So I couched the information. I gave it a context, and I try to give it over to them in a way that right now may not be applicable. Right now they may have no interest, but it could well be that in the future it's going to impact them. Now, I work in formal and informal education. I teach schools, college. I speak in many places. And it's happened on more than one occasion. And it's going to happen to you, every single one of you, whether you realize it or not. Someone is going to approach you at some point in their lives and say, which has happened to me. I mean, I've been teaching 20 years. And someone will say to me, you know, I was in your class 15 years ago. And you were saying things and it was nice and fun and enjoyable. And I always remember the jokes you said. By the way, people always remember the jokes. The jokes will stay with people. The Divrei Torah, that they sometimes forget. From week to week, you can always keep the same Divrei Torah, but the jokes you can't retell a week later. And they'll say, I remember the jokes, but I remember you said something and I didn't fully understand why you were saying it, or maybe the way you were saying it, or why you put so much value and importance on this one piece of information. You like downloaded this one idea and you made it so, and you kept going on and I didn't understand. Now that I'm married, or I got kids, or I'm a teacher, 5, 10, 15 years later, I get it. Now I understand. I didn't appreciate that lesson. Sometimes, I mean, think about yourselves. Think about a teacher that you had, whether formally in school, college, high school, yeshiva, wherever it was, yeshiva, or maybe an idea you heard somewhere, and it was kind of like floating in your head, and many years later, you grab that idea, something your grandmother said to you, and you're like, wow, my God, that is so true. I never gave that person enough thanks at the time. And they'll call me up, happens a lot, or they'll email. I get such emails all the time, and they're like, you know, you said something. We were on a trip to Israel, right? I've led many trips, maybe 30 trips to Israel and Poland, and you said something, I never fully got it, and now the coin drops. Sometimes the coin drops immediately, and a person makes an immediate change, and sometimes, most of the time, it takes time, because time takes time, and wisdom and knowledge is the same. And therefore, I'll say to you, don't get frustrated when you're teaching or giving over an idea to someone else and they just don't get it. You never know. That information is with them. They could share it with somebody else who will gain from that wisdom. Maybe it's going to take them time in order to fully grasp that information, because not all knowledge is the binyan form. So don't be frustrated. And I in my early years as a rabbi, I used to get very irritated. I used to speak to young men and women, share an idea, and I thought they'd feel the passion for it. And they're like, oh, whatever, on their phone. But eventually it came to me after speaking to my teachers and advisors that it's there. They've heard. They soak it up. It could be in their mind, it could be deep in their subconscious, that every single idea you share with someone else is there. It's been downloaded. It's somewhere deep in their cerebellum or hippocampus. I'm not too sure where it goes. But it's deep. And at some point later on, they're going to be able to grab it and pull it out, and they're going to use that information when it comes to their parenting, their own personal life, their challenges they go through. We all hear stories of terrible challenges that people have gone through. Those stories are important to hear, although maybe your life right now is also challenging. I know no such person. We're all being challenged. But maybe a crisis can come up and that information has been stored somewhere. It has grown as you've grown because the wisdom inside us grows with us and allows us to access it when we really, really need it. And so when you think back to those lessons as a child, you're like, wow, that impacted me then. Or maybe I didn't even like that teacher then. I didn't like to hear that idea. But now I really, really am pleased that I did. Okay? There's an interesting Gemara which talks about a rabbi called Rabbi Preda. Rabbi Preda. It's an incredible Gemara. Rabbi Preda had a student. And this student, the Gemara tells us, was not smart. He was actually, seems like a little dull and didn't understand. And the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Preda had to teach this boy one idea 400 times before it sunk in. Now, I wasn't a great student as a kid. I only started really studying, as I always tell my kids, or my wife gets upset with me for saying this. I only started studying when I was 11th grade. That's when I started to get serious with my studies. Right, 11th and 12th grade, I studied because I wanted to study. I'm that kind of person. I can't just study because I need to or I have to. I need to feel a connection to my wife is not the same. My wife can download information. I don't want to study. I have to study it. She'll read stuff. She's an accountant. She'll just download information. And that's good enough for her. I never was that way. If I was interested, if I wasn't interested, I checked out and I wasn't there. So I only started learning myself when I was in 11th grade. And so Rabbi Preda had a student who just didn't get it. Maybe wasn't interested. And Rabbi Preda had to sit with his student and teach him one idea 400 times. Me personally, it took like 20. 400 times. One day, Rabbi Preda was dealing with something in his life and he was uncomfortable or felt busy or distracted is the right word. And he taught this young student 400 times this one idea. And the student turned around at the end and said, after 400 times, I still don't get it. I felt that you're distracted, you're in a bit of a rush, you have something else on your mind. Rabbi Preda said, no problem. I'll teach it to you another 400 times. And he sat with his kid, says the Gemara, and taught him the same information in total 800 times until he understood it. Now, I thought about the Gemara a lot. By the way, Rabbi Preda, the Gemara says, whatever this means, was given a choice for this tremendous mitzvah, which is what the Gemara considers it, to have hundreds of years added onto his life. That's probably not literal, but it means the impact that he would make for the rest of his life would impact as though he'd been alive for hundreds more years. There are such people who achieve in their life what it would take regular people like me and you hundreds of years to achieve. Or your entire generation will go to Olam Haba. Now, what does that mean? Has to be understood. Not for now. It's an interesting discussion. But I'll tell you what he chose. He chose number 2. And I always wonder about that. He could have personally benefited from this knowledge that he was giving to this kid 800 times. And instead, Rabbi Preda said, it's not about me. I want to impact as many people as possible in the deepest way. And there's no great deeper way than impacting a person by guaranteeing them a place in Olam Haba. So the choice that he made reflected very beautifully who he was. He was about other people. Now, this story has a lot of depth to it, but even on the surface, the fact that he realized that I'm going to teach this to you once, you don't get it. The information was there. So what was Rabbi Preda doing? He was operating in the Zoreah. He was in the planting version. Once again, what are the two approaches? Planting or building? Building is seeing immediate results from your information. And that's one way to teach. But we said seeding is more important because there's a much stronger chance of a long-term impact, even though in the short term, the person just doesn't get it. And Rabbi Preda was dealing with a kid who just didn't get it. And he was still willing to plug away with this one kid who he, to the Gemara, considers not so smart, and yet he got it. And by the way, think back to school. Right? I always tell people to think back. I mean, I have this obsession, whatever happened to, right? Kids in my class from high school, how did they end up? And I look back at some of the kids who seemed so bright at the time and so brilliant, and their lives, in many cases, just fell away. Because maybe they were getting the Bonet version, but they weren't getting the Zoreah version. They were getting the information there and then, and they were able to give the right answer in the test. So their Bonet, their building was good. But they weren't able to take that information, store it, seed it, blossom it, grow it, and take the fruits for long-term impact. And their lives were destroyed. I have some of the smartest people I know growing up ended up taking drugs, alcohol, broken marriages, just a complete mess. Although they did well in high school. How could that be? If they were so good in high school, why aren't they good in life? Because there's two forms of information and two ways to download information. One is building immediate results, but we want lifelong results. We want the Torah. We want the wisdom to last with a person for a long, long time. You know, we're on Chanukah, right? We're just in the 6th day of Chanukah. It's also Rosh Chodesh. And the Gemara says something very fascinating, since it's Inyana de Yoma, something which is applicable today, that if you want children who are Talmidei Chachamim, who are good learners of spiritual and impactful Torah, light the lights of the menorah. The light of the menorah, if you spend time and money and effort on this mitzvah, right, you will have a great impact on children. Now, I will mention, we talk about children, but the Gemara and the Chumash actually makes a big deal of saying that anyone that you teach Torah to, it's as though you are their parent. And that is true, by the way. Whoever you teach, you take on the status of their parent. Really, parents are obligated to teach children. V'shinantum levanecha. Then why are we sending our kids off to yeshiva in order to learn? Because there are people who know more than us, for sure. And by handing our kids off to them and paying them, it's as though we teach them. So the teacher takes on the position of the parent. And that's why in Judaism, we consider the teacher of someone to be like their parents. We see in the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Torah teacher that ever lived. And he is considered the parent of all these children. And many times, Moshe Rabbeinu was called the father for the reason that he's giving over information. So when you teach someone as a teacher or an advisor or a friend, for that moment, or maybe forever, you become their parent. Whether you were given the permission and the responsibility of teaching that child or not. Because you teaching, you are becoming the parent. And so, although the Gemara says that that light in the menorah will give you great children who are wise in Torah and mitzvot, it's not just talking about actual children. It's talking about whoever you teach become like your children. So lighting the menorah is a symbol of educating the next generation, or maybe even your generation. Why? Why would the Gemara pick up on the menorah and the Hanukkah menorah? We're talking about specifically the Chanukiah, is what we're talking about, right? The lights that we light on Hanukkah. Right? That's what it's talking about. When you light your Hanukkah lights, you are impacting knowledge and wisdom to other people. Why is that the metaphor? Well, I've mentioned before that we have one non-Jewish neighbor over here, the only one that's managed to hold out in my very Jewish neighborhood, as you can imagine. And this individual has Christmas lights, and they are bright. I mean, when he turns on these Christmas lights, all of the lights in my neighborhood start to like flicker and dim. It's like so much information. And I'll tell you something fascinating. What do we do at the same time? Around the same time, Lavdil, we turn on the Hanukkah light. And we light the menorah. And what is the Chanukiah? What is this Chanukiah all about? It's about, as we said, giving information. Pirsum Nisa. Now there's a lot of messages that the menorah gives, that we light, the Chanukiah that we give. And I've mentioned that in previous classes. But I'll mention one more, because light in Judaism, actually even in life too, represents wisdom. Wisdom. So if that's true, we want a lot of wisdom to get out there. So why aren't we doing the same thing? Why aren't we making a big bonfire on our front lawn and allowing the wisdom to shine out? Why aren't we doing my friend over here with his Christmas lights and having reindeers, right? And doing the snow globe and Santa Claus and lighting up the entire neighborhood? Why, for us, the Jewish people, is wisdom represented as a single flame? Each night is a new and additional flame. And the answer is that you can't push wisdom on other people. It doesn't work that way. There's an element of that, an element of boneh. But if you want long-term, next-generational results of people's actions and behavior, it's a little flame. What does the flame represent? First of all, it represents the neshama. That's why the flame flickers. And when we pray, right, we Jews do this. It's actually our neshama that is flickering inside us. And when we learn as well, we're like, I get it. But as well as that, the flame is there. It doesn't get in your face. It's not like a flashlight or a light bulb that shines out in your face or a big bonfire. It's a little flame. If you want it, it's here for you. This little flame can make a big change in the world. It's interesting. If I have a bucket of water, I can give each and every one some water, but eventually I'm going to run out and I have less. The more you give of a physical thing, you may be able to benefit other people, but in the end you have less. But when it comes to a flame, I can have one flame and I can give you some flame and you flame, and it can spread to millions of people, and yet my flame is still the same flame from the beginning. It hasn't diminished a single iota. That is the idea of education. I can give to you, I am still strong, and you can have the same as me. And you can grow from that experience, from that learning experience, from that wisdom. Because Torah, Torah is light. Even in the secular world, the idea of the light bulb, it represents new information that a person has suddenly appeared on the scene. There is that truth. But this little flame can impact you. It's so small. But I'm planting this little idea, this little piece of wisdom inside you, and you may not see the results right now. But in a week, a month, a year, that flame is going to grow into something much, much bigger, because that flame is going to touch another wick, then another candle, and someone else, and it's going to grow and grow, and the impact is going to be exponential. That, my friends, is what the rabbis were talking about. They were telling us that not all information are you going to appreciate, understand, but don't extinguish it. That flame is there. It may be, and I've heard many such stories of people who put a menorah in their window, and someone walked past and saw that little flame and said, not for me, I'm not interested. And then a month later, a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, that little flame resonates inside them and has tremendous impact upon their lives. Time takes time. Wisdom takes time. It may be bona, an immediate result, but sometimes, my friends, it's a little seed you're putting inside that little flame that's going to grow one day into something much, much bigger and impactful just when that person needs it. Time takes time. I prayed in a synagogue in Miami over Shabbat, and the rabbi of the synagogue, I think Rabbi Lipska, told a very powerful story. It happened to be his fundraising weekend. So he spoke from the pulpit to the people with our davening in the early minyan with my son. And he told the story how he founded his synagogue. Those people who know the synagogue in Bal Harbor may have heard the story before, but I heard it from him himself, a very great and holy Jew. And he spoke, this was his beginning to his fundraising, and he's a great fundraiser as well. And he said that when he opened the synagogue in Miami, it's hard to believe he could not get a minyan. Now it's a massive structure with thousands and thousands of Jews who go and learn, children. But when he started, wasn't even a minyan. And he had to bring in people. And he said that he saw this old guy walking around, and he said to him, come in, I'm sure you have. He goes, you know, it's funny. I have the yard site coming up, but I'm not interested. He said, just come inside. Come inside and just say Kaddish for the soul of your mother. And he's like, all right, but don't talk to me. I don't want to hear a single thing from you. Say nothing. I don't want to hear Judaism. I don't know religion, right? I have a non-Jewish wife, non-Jewish children, non-Jewish grandchildren. I'm not interested. Don't get involved. He says, no problem. He came in, didn't say a word the entire service, said his Kaddish, and started to walk out. The rabbi chased after him and said, I hope you... And he's like, don't talk to me, don't preach to me, I don't want to hear a single word. I'm going to have breakfast now, and you should know, I'm going to have a ham sandwich. So he said to this rabbi, I was like, by the way, what does a ham sandwich cost? He says, what do you care? $5? He's like, here, I'll give you $5. Go buy yourself some nice breakfast. So you're giving me $5 to eat a ham sandwich? He said, yes, I am. I want you to have something. And the guy's like, there's more to this rabbi than meets the eye. Many, many weeks later, he came back. He became a regular member. According to the rabbi, and he said this publicly on Shabbat, the guy became one of the biggest donors, gave millions of dollars. He died an observant and proud Jew. Little things, little flames. I know we want to impact people and shout at them and be bonehead, but binyan is only one form of education. Sometimes a little seed you'll put inside them, a little message, a little idea. Sometimes the biggest changes in our lives aren't the big ideas, but it's something very small and innocuous that kind of got into our heads and like, wow, that's true. And I'm impacted by that. Let's keep that in mind when we teach our children, our friends, that sometimes we're in the world of binyan, but the results of binyan aren't always long-term, because houses can be built that can also crash down, but a seed can build a tree, can build a forest, can build an orchard, and it can impact the entire world. Just like one little flame, that Hanukkah flame can impact many, many people for a long, long time. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Wishing you all a wonderful end of Hanukkah. The lights of the menorah of your Chanukiah should stay with you and your families and have great impact on all the Jewish people. And Chodesh Tov, we started a new month. Wishing you all tremendous bracha. That's lacha. Thank you.